Hey everybody, Caleb here again, and in this video we are going to learn how we can practically use the view layer to update how things look. And we can use the view obviously to modify how things look because that is the actual piece, the actual element that the user sees and interacts with. Now what we're going to do in this video is create what's called a custom view subclass. And basically this is a code file that we are going to be able to create that will basically create a custom version of the code files provided by Apple that we can customize to however we want. So go ahead and right click on the view folder, click new file, and what we're going to create is called a Cocoa Touch class. And what this is essentially it is a custom class that we're going to create. And so this is going to basically be a custom view. So I'm going to go ahead and call it that, custom view. And it's going to subclass UI view. Now, if you're still a little foggy on inheritance, inheritance in Swift is basically where we create a new class and we inherit all of the existing properties and functions and capabilities of another class. But we can add our own custom functionality to this new class while still benefiting from all the stuff in the other class. Click Next to create this subclass and click Create once more. And now, as you can see, we have a class called custom view that inherits from UI view. That's what this : UI view part means. Now there is a comment here. It's kind of boilerplate code that we're going to just get rid of because we don't need it. And what we are going to do inside this custom subclass is we're going to set up this white view here so that it has a nice rounded border and a black perimeter going around this, white view. So in order to do that, we need to call a function called awake from nib. And as you can see, it says it prepares the receiver for service after it has been loaded from an interface builder archive or nib file. And right now you're probably thinking, what does that even mean? Basically, awake from nib is going to take our custom view, okay, this view here, the white one, and what it's going to do is it's going to prepare any visual updates or visual changes that need to happen before it's actually drawn onto the screen. That's the purpose of awake from nib, and in our custom subclass here, we actually are doing something called an override. This function is declared elsewhere, and we are overriding the default awake from nib function and putting our own custom implementation in so that it will look the way that we want it instead of the way that the default Apple UI view class draws it. So let's go ahead and let's learn how quickly to set a border color. So we're going to go ahead and set a border on this by typing layer.border color. And in order to set a border color, we need to use the UI color class. So type UI color dot, let's make it a black border. But the weird thing is that with a border color, it needs to be of type CG color. Thankfully, UI color allows us to pull that out. So we can type UI color.black .cg color. Next up, we need to tell the UI view, the custom class, how thick to draw the border. So go ahead and type layer.border width, and let's set it to something like, 5. How about that? We can always experiment and change it whenever we want. Next up, we want to set it so that this view has rounded corners, because that's kind of a cool feature, and you see rounded corners a lot in a lot of iOS applications. In order to do that, we need to set layer.corner radius. Okay, the corner radius, if we look here at the definition, it is the radius to use when drawing rounded corners for the layer's background. And it is animatable, which we can talk about later. But for now, let's set it to be, something like 15. Not super round, but pretty round. One last thing we need to do in order to get UI view to actually cut out these rounded corners is we need to set a property to true called clips to bounds. And essentially this is a Boolean value that determines whether subviews are confined to the bounds of the view. And we're going to set it to true so that they are confined, okay? Now, the cool thing here, we've created this custom subclass. How do we actually get this view to use that code file instead of the default Apple implementation of UI view? There is a tool in here called the Identity Inspector. And we can click here on the Identity Inspector, and you'll see there is an option for a custom class. Now, I can look through and I can find all of these custom classes, but if I were to set this view to be, something like a UI text view, we wouldn't get very far. That doesn't make sense. What I can do is I can type custom view and find the view that I just created. If I set that, you'll notice we don't see any changes here, and that's because the changes visually can only happen when we run the code. So let's go ahead and run the code. Let's compile it to the simulator, and let's see how our UI view looks with our new custom subclass. We should have a nice rounded border, and look at that. That's exactly right. That looks great. We have rounded edges. We have a border that is black. Looks pretty good. I am noticing that the text is kind of tightly wrapped around the edge here. So let's go ahead and let's add some more spacing. Just good to kind of, do some tweaks here and there. So let's go ahead and let's update the constraints for this label. In order to do that, I went over here to what is called the size inspector. And I'm going to set the leading space or the left space to actually be more like 15. Then I'm going to set the trailing space to be 15. And let's set the top space to be 15 as well. Then we can go ahead and do the same sort of thing over here. We can set the trailing space to 15, the leading space to 15, and the top space to be 15. Well, those labels actually are pretty okay being close together. So let's leave that at 8, but then let's set the leading and trailing space for the detailed definition, or description rather, to be 15. Okay, very cool. Oh, and you know what? Let's set the bottom space to be 15 because we set the top space to be 15. Cool, so let's go ahead, let's build and run this, and let's see how it looks. By the way, in order to build and run quickly, I just do Command R. Okay, look at this. This looks way, way better. Very cool. This is looking nice. Our view is now set up, but we need to actually talk about what is going on here. We've set a custom view subclass, okay? And we have told our interface here in Xcode that we want this view to be a custom view. We set it in the identity inspector, right? Now, that is happening thanks to the interface of Xcode. But if we wanted to set this to be a custom subclass another way, we could right click and drag, make this an IB outlet. And as you can see, custom view shows up there. That's another way that we could do this. But for now, what is happening is the view controller is communicating with Xcode, and Xcode is telling it to run this custom view setup code. So the view controller is handling all of that behind the scenes for us, actually. And there is a way that we could do this all programmatically, but Xcode's interface makes it very easy to do this without actually needing to write code in the view controller. It all happens behind the scenes. But if you look at our simulator here, it's working. The view is set up properly. And in the next video, we're going to learn how to create a model layer, then create some data, and actually create an instance of our model, pass it into our view, and use the view controller to manage all of it. It's going to be really cool. Let's head over there and do it now.